Hi, Martyn Ware, founding member of Human League, Heaven 17, producer of Tina Turner and Erasure, but most importantly, a socialist. So thank you so much
Yes,
on 10 by 6 and talking to us.
solidarity.
Solidarity, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting because when you put out the call to talk about politics, because ultimately, obviously, we're in a time with a general election, but we're coming up really where there's two establishment parties, and one of those establishment parties is going to win primarily because of our voting system, and all the other parties may have a little bit of an impact here and there. But the Corbyn years, which I know you and I both supported, were the opportunity for this country really to take everything by the scruff of the neck and shake it up a bit. And unfortunately, the establishment, in their way, came down hard. And I know one of the things that
They
you
they got perilously close to allowing it to happen. They were never going to let it happen again. In fact, I think we all remember Theresa May losing a rag one day in the House of Commons saying, "We will never let you win." And
yes.
that was, to me, that was a chilling moment because it's like, number one, who is we? And number two, and assuming that we refers to the people in power, not just the current government, but some kind what we in shorthand would call the establishment. Why do they feel they have the power to ensure that a socialist alternative will never win? Number three, to even openly state that they would not allow it to happen is an abrogation of the basic principles of democracy. So from that moment on, it was a real kind of it for me. I've been a member on and off of the Labour Party. I'm not anymore, by the way, since Starmer came into power, but for 40 years. I That was the moment I think when it crystallized my thoughts that it's never going to change in this country unless, well, there's only one thing that could possibly change it, which is proportional representation. I My personal view is that they're never going to allow that to happen either, but also that they are quite capable of voter manipulation and manipulating the polls and cheating essentially. We've seen with voter ID, this is a specific effort to increase the percentage of people who might go, oh, I can't be asked, or they're not in the system, or they don't have any officially recognised. And it's all right saying, oh, well, you can apply for a, you can apply for a document which allows you to. You know what? It's like going, well, if you queue up for 3 hours, you can have a vote. People won't do it. There has to be a zero friction ability for people to believe in democracy, that they potentially have an influence, them and their extended family, their friends, their people around them. It will make a difference. If they believe it doesn't make a difference, which is what I think the aim of this kind of mechanism is, then it plays straight into the hands. That's why I say to people who turn around to me online and say, look, keep politics out of music and all that stuff. I go, well, every single thing you do every day is a political act, whether you like it or not. You may not understand it, or you may not choose to acknowledge it. But even like, I don't know, which corner shop you shop in, as opposed to a corporate chain, which whether you use public services feeds into the demo to the metrics that they present to their bosses, whether or not it's worth keeping a library open, for instance. All these things seem quite minor, but in the grand scheme of things, they matter. Everything matters. Your actions matter on a daily and hourly basis.
When you go back to your childhood, Martyn, growing up in Sheffield,
Yeah.
do you think that there was more opportunities then for people to facilitate change, or do you think it's got worse or stayed the same?
That's a very good question. When I was growing up in Sheffield, the general zeitgeist around that time, because Thatcher's government had closed down large numbers of the steelworks, and there was like 70,000 extra unemployed. I never wanted to go into the steelworks anyway. And my dad really was a tool maker, unlike Starmer's dad, who was a tool maker, but he had his own company. No, my dad worked in the most appalling conditions, and was a big trade unionist and died early because of the conditions that he worked in. All I remember is when I was growing up in this and leaving school in the 70s is everybody had a full-time job. Part-time jobs were regarded as anathema for working people. It was like, why would I do a part-time job? You had, it was acknowledged that you had the right to have a full-time job. That's how the news used to report unemployment figures. So essentially, there was full employment. There's full-time employment. It might not be exactly the job you want, but there's full-time employment for those who wanted it. That's not the case now, obviously. As we're entering into late-stage capitalism, resources are declining, profits are declining, the cake is getting smaller, and so they have to grab more of the cakes. Therefore, they have to deny workers' rights. They have to kill the unions, which they've effectively done in the UK largely. When was the last time you saw the TUC proclaiming on anything? It is a neutered cat. It's got nothing of any political importance to say. And it's cowardly as well, I think. And even the unions in Britain who have huge memberships and still finance the current Labour Party, largely, with the political levy. I mean, when I left the Labour Party, I joined Unite because I couldn't, with hand on heart, with a conscience, join the Musicians Union because they're a right-wing entity. And I joined Unite, and next thing you know, it's turned into a shit show again. So then it's like that's been appropriated. All the mainstream media's been appropriated. TV, radio. There isn't a single left-wing newspaper apart from Socialist Worker. I mean, people look now and go, it's just the way things are. It's the way things have evolved. It's not, it doesn't have to be that way, number one. And secondly, it's been manipulated very strongly behind the scenes in that direction for many years. And we're not even got onto the attempts at kind of covert world governments of the Bilderbergs and the Trilateral Commission. And by the way, has anybody out there been and had a look at the Trilateral Commission website? I have. I went there the other day to have a look at the signatories to it. I would say probably at least 50% of the people involved are from the world of finance and banking internationally.
Yeah.
And I'd say probably another 20-25% are from government organizations of some description or political organizations, and the remainder is a bunch of shadowy fucking pressure groups, people who, oh, don't get me started, fucking APAC in America. I saw a thing on the internet yesterday, a 50-minute news item on American news saying that APAC now finances over 25% of all the senators in Congress. And I think it's pretty similar in the House of Representatives. How is that meant to represent the American people?
I mean, in terms of the Trilateral Commission, we wrote an article, we published an article which I co-wrote in 2020 when Starmer was elected leader of the Labour Party, and it was really trying to get the warnings out there. I mean, it's one of our most popular articles. Yeah. And of course, he claims now to have resigned, but he's probably
still on the website. I was there the other day.
Right. Okay. Well, in that case, he's still a member. But you've got to remember, Epstein and Kissinger are also previous members of this organization. It's almost as if now I don't think they really care, because they think that so few people, apart from people like you and myself, will actually take an interest. But as I say, it's one of our most read articles.
I think this kind of shadowy world government thing, it's very easy to for people to go, oh, you're just conspiracy theorists, right? It's all out there in the open. If you choose to look at it, the facts are there. The world is now run on pressure groups. It's run, and most of the pressure groups are associated with money.
Yes.
The vast majority. So the world, it's a cliche, but follow the money. Anywhere you go, people who are claiming to be doing things for political reasons or moral reasons even, you just follow the money. Where's the money flowing? How is it flowing? Where's it flowing to? And so we're, I do sound like a bit of a crackpot now, I admit, but
No.
I believe that one of the main engines that's driving our demise as a human race is our increasingly slavish worship of big data, because it makes, in a nutshell, I could go into it for hours, but in a nutshell, it makes it much more efficient to be bad. You can be a bad person for bad reasons, for bad aims, to make money much more efficiently than ever before, because not just because everybody goes AI. Yeah, that's not great either, but it's not AI. It's just people designing programs to more efficiently rinse the general population who show no interest in politics or I've got very little understanding of what's going on under the bonnet of world politics, world socio-economic politics especially.
And it's also very interesting, isn't it, that the idea going back to the Russian Revolution was very much that we are large, they are small. And so the philosophy was that that we can take from the small, and it would be a fairly straightforward process, and then we will have the means of distribution, so the means of production, etc. But the problem is, I see it, is that as we've become larger and larger and larger, they found much more sophisticated mechanisms in order to control us. And therefore, actually, the fact that we're almost 9 billion now, actually, I think we're less powerful than we were when we were 2 or 3 billion a century ago.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the hope globally for me is holistically the increasing power of the BRICS nations, or different world economic blocs, to kind of mitigate against the out of control runaway train of late stage capitalism in the West, does offer some hope. However, once you start including countries like Saudi Arabia in with the BRICS countries, and I don't think there is as much hope as I would like to think, because it's like frying pan fire scenario if we're not careful. Because if we've got to find a way of enabling redistribution of wealth, on a global level, whilst not raping the planet.
Yes.
End of story. That's it.
Yes.
I mean, we're as an entity, if you look at the global population, unless we can mitigate against climate change, we're all fucked anyway. So you can scrabble over the scraps, but it's going to be increasing the amount of scraps.
And it's
And so
interesting
you're
as
going to
well.
end up with giant gated fucking Dubai-like communities across the
Yes.
earth for rich people, and everybody else can go hang as far as they're concerned.
But there is a supposition which is it's building sort of quite a sort of velocity, if you like, in that humans will destroy themselves. Nature will redeem the planet and remove most of us or all of us at some point, and that we are the precipitators of our own self-destruction. But that, in a way, is quite simplistic in that the fact that a lot of us are the one, we don't want that as an outcome, or two, we are not paying attention, and we see our lives as being relatively short, and therefore, even though it's longer than any other point in our human history, but we still see it as very consumption orientated. So if we want to make ourselves feel happy, we will, I don't know, buy a film or Netflix or Sky, or we will go out and buy a car or whatever we'll do. We've almost got to do you think we've almost got to get to a point where we are seeing the realities in our face, as opposed to on TV or hearing on the radio? Do we actually got to see it in our face before we start thinking, bugger?
I believe very strongly in confirmation bias. I think people see what they want to see or what they anticipate they will see. So for you and I, and anybody who's listening to this, watching it, to go online and see on a daily basis the kind of horrors that I'd never witnessed in my life until adulthood, until well into adulthood, when you started seeing some of the secret footage from the concentration camps in the Second World War, for instance, or the worst we ever saw was probably things like mass graves in Srebrenica or something. Now it's like, oh, open up your phone. Hello, first image is half of a human body of a child on a daily basis. Horrors beyond the comprehension of Dante's Inferno. And so what I think is we're seeing this stuff. If you're an empathetic individual, it's going to hurt. I can't turn my back on it, and I'm sure you can't, and I'm sure all right-minded people. I go on every Palestine march. I take an interest in what's going on in the Congo and various other African conflicts. Always have done, always been an activist. We are in a very, very small minority. Most people will just take what's spoon-fed them on the telly. I would include in that just about everybody I know, to be honest. And a lot of them are highly intelligent, creative people. So people who care, people who take notice, people who make an effort to discover the truth for themselves in this Library of Alexandria that we've got online now in our pockets.
Yes.
Most people find it incredibly overwhelming, so they just go, look, I've got enough on my plate. I can't deal with it. I can't do that personally. I have, however much it hurts, I've got to do something a little bit because I know, because of my socialist beliefs, that a tiny effort from little people is multiplied by solidarity with other people. It's not just adding a million people together. It's multiplying by, multiplying every time people get involved. So that's why I say, getting back to the point about our actions are political. Everything we do is political. We make choices on a daily basis on the way that we interact with the world outside and with our friends. That you and I and the people who presumably listen to this podcast have to sleep at night. I mean, I can't not. But I'm not sure how many people are like that. I mean, what do you think?
Well, while you were talking, it was interesting because I was thinking about other artists, musical artists, who possibly that you know of, you talk to, or even who you could collaborate with. I mean, I'm thinking which, you know, so a band that's already covered, you know,
Mm,
Fascist Groove was obviously LCD Sound System, and someone like
yeah,
James Murphy. You've got Matt Johnson, you have got, there's other artists, quite a few artists out there who maybe if we brought them together, some sort of getting, a unifying musical message in which it wasn't just spots every so often. Do you know what I mean? On the
yeah. The
landscape.
problem is that card has been played, and Band Aid. I was on Band Aid. I was part of Red Wedge in the 80s. Um, these things have an impact in terms of um, popular perception, which in turn have an impact on political decisions, as we've just identified. The problem is that trope has become very threadbare as far as I'm concerned. Um, I mean, I could, if I wanted to, I know enough people in the music industry probably, and if I wanted to devote a year to it, I could get together, you know, a big event somewhere. The amount of coverage it would get would be great for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then people would forget about it. Um, and then once you take into account that the general media will try and trivialize it, the more news orientated media will go, oh, bloody just making money, because essentially that's what Bob Geldof did. He made a career out of his I was on a plane with Bob Geldof in 1981, where he spent 3 hours telling me how great Margaret Thatcher was going to be for Britain, by the way. So I'm not buying. There are people who get into this stuff not necessarily for the right reasons as well, which again clouds the issue. So say for instance, like when Corbyn was campaigning, and my friends, The Farm and Reverend and the Makers, took part in a concert up north in Preston, I think it was, a football ground, and everything felt like there was a kind of, it was in the air, wasn't it? It was like things, it felt like something might change. And then Corbyn went and did appeared on the stage at Glastonbury, and it got a massive reception. That, I believe, is the point at which the big shutdown started from the establishment. They went, this stuff has got to fucking stop now, or else we are heading for the summer of fucking love if we're not careful. I honestly believe it was an epiphanal moment for the establishment. They went, we can't just assume this is gonna be real forevermore, or that we're gonna be in charge forevermore. We are the chosen people. We need to be in charge forever. Nobody else is qualified for the job. We're really doing it as a for the benefit of the nation. That's how they talk about it to themselves, probably. Not money, of course, nothing like that. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. Could it do any harm? No, of course not. Would it be probably a gigantic waste of time? Maybe it would give hope to people for a while. But what's really needed is genuine left-wing representation in a democratic process in Britain, and it needs proportional representation. And neither of those things seem to be happening anytime soon.
I mean, listening to obviously to what you say, and I'm with you 100% in terms of this feeling of it's not the hopelessness, I guess, but it's the fact that the juggernaut is now going so fast that it hasn't got the brake pads to cope with it turning around. It's almost as if, it's the last scene of the young ones going over the cliff has just become this perception now of inevitability. However, what we do believe in at Dorset Eye, and the reasons we set it up initially was to give the people power at the bottom. So
Right.
all the people who are ignored, ultimately by the corporate legacy media, they're not the voices that we're necessarily seeking. We're seeking the people who just go by their day-to-day lives 24/7, who don't get an opportunity to speak. So if they want to speak, if they want to say something, as long as it's within our ethos and our ethics, here we are. So in any situation where people look up to people like yourself and musicians, whether it's because of their politics or not, one of the things that it enables people to do is for people to think that somebody cares,
Yeah, of course.
somebody gives a shit. And forget the Live Aid stuff for a moment, because a lot of people were very cynical around that. But certainly the Red Wedge stuff. I mean, I went to Red Wedge. I saw Joe Strummer after he'd left the Clash. I saw the Crop Dusters, and then they couldn't hang and that sort of stuff at the time. But it enabled an ensemble of people to come together and to believe. Now, I think that the thing around uniting artists around socialist, left-wing, emancipatory politics isn't about this creating this one event or this say 2 or 3 events. It's about what happens at those events. For example, getting young people to register, basically to get all the information that they need to do in order to be able to go along and vote. So if the state are coming back at them and saying, you can't vote unless you've got ID, and they're thinking, well, many young people haven't bothered to get ID. Well, one of the things that we do is to get every young person with ID. So when then Starmer gets in, which he inevitably will, 2 or 3 years into his term, he's going to come up to a hell of a shock, because all these young people we think, oh, they're not going to vote. All I've done is I've won over the old Tory voters, whatever. But actually, suddenly the young people come flying forward, and they've got these people constantly doing little things. Yes, okay, the occasional big thing, but the big thing stands out, Martyn. It's the little things that they don't notice that this go on. So like you're right, you say Corbyn at Glastonbury became a big thing. It became the catalyst for hitting back. But we don't necessarily need the Corbyn at Glastonbury moment. We just need around the country lots of little things that become.
No, I'm with you. I'm completely with you. And there are people. I mean, it's not just music, is it? It's popular culture. I mean, what's happened to the alternative comedy? I mean, seriously, what has happened to it? It's largely, or the things that get attention at least, are very middle class. It's a bit like music now. I mean, I taught as principal and lecturer at a college in London, MA Music, Composition and Production. all those kids couldn't afford to go from working class families. They might, I don't know, there may be some grant, well, there's a grant scheme, but you end up paying it back at like 6% interest. So it's as bad as a student grant. You know, it's just a big money making machine. But what the net effect of this, it's only like kids with well-off parents that can afford to send them really to these places. So you're looking at the cultural landscape is becoming more and more skewed towards the middle classes in comedy, in music, in art, proportionate representation of working class voices or lower economic group, whichever you prefer to call it, voices is getting more skewed downwards than ever before in this country, in my view. Since the Second World War anyway. And I don't know how you turn that round without having some form of balance and control, or significant oversight of the means of distributing information. Well, I believe I believe we've been in World War III for about 15 years. It's an information war, you know. There are two levels of reality. There's the realities that you and I see in our everyday lives, going to work, on the streets, people around us, stories you hear in the pub. Fine, that's one level. And they're and the people who control our lives on a global and a national level are quite willing to let us have this facsimile of a meaningful life. But they're not willing to, the real information war is going on at media level. So they tell you what they tell you the frame in which you're allowed to be free. They tell you how you're allowed to express yourself. They make it perfectly clear that it's okay to be like the people on Gogglebox and do fuck all and be the royal family. You know, not the royal, I mean, the comedy royal family. It's, you know, you've got the kind of the proliferation of shaming programs on TV of like, you know, benefit sheets and I mean body shaming. You know it. They've got everything in there, and then of course they try and wash it all clean by having LGBTQ plus programs and like, you know, I Kissed a Girl, and you know, to supposedly give us balance. Well, it's not balanced. It's not, because poor people are degraded on television all the time, and that seeps into destroying the confidence of working class poor people, educationally, from an artistic point of view, music. I've just done an interview with Mike Gary, the poet, who's originally from Manchester. He's a good man. And he teaches, he's very passionate about teaching young people. He said the big problem is, and I agree with him completely, is confidence. You know, I just wrote my autobiography last year, which was, I wrote it during lockdown, but it was published last year. And it was a very enlightening process that I went through, because it made me realize that as a working class kid who grew up in a council houses all my life in Sheffield, then eventually moved to London when I could afford to, for the music industry. But I still go to Sheffield on a bi-weekly basis for football and everything. So I see my family up there and everything. I realized that it's only when I started doing my autobiography that I realized I've always suffered from a lack of confidence because of my upbringing, because you're constantly being told that it's not for the likes of you. And now it's much, much worse now, because you don't get maintenance grants for university. you have to pay to go to university. Even if you do get a job afterwards, they take the money straight out of your account on PAYE. I mean, a lot of working class kids have got no chance of ever going to university now. They're never going to be able to pay back 60 grand or something. If you go through it, you get an undergraduate degree and then you get an MA. You're looking at 60K minimum. I mean, we've got a major problem in this country, which is the diminution of appreciation of youth and the power of youth, the value of youth. Because the more the people who are in charge are more frightened of the power that they can exert against an iniquitous system. And this is as much to do with, this is real socialism. This is like human socialism on a very basic level that people on I mean, I live in London. Honestly, it's like a empathy-free zone a lot of the time. I see people putting themselves in their own caste, not just ethnically. I mean, levels. And it's getting a bit like LA. I spent a bit of time in LA in the music industry. Well, it's like people don't really mix in between different social strata. It's like you don't get, at least you still get in London and most cities, places where people go and accidentally bump into each other of different classes and blah, 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 and mix in pubs. Don't even get that in LA. Nothing happens unless you make an appointment to go and do it or go to somebody's house. And I think we're aiming in that direction. I think sociologically, we're in a deeply problematical trajectory at the moment.
Yeah, I mean we're running out of time, and I don't really want to finish off on a sort of a really depressing note. Only because it's tried to be solution based, and we try to
I understand that.
Get people to think, okay, well, this is the reality.
Yeah, but to create a solution, you've got to understand the problems that you're confronting.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And that in itself is part of the problem, because so many people haven't got the skill set to understand the problem, and therefore how the hell are they ever going to find a solution? Absolutely. And we could probably talk all day or talk all week, Martyn, in terms of the issues that many demographics experience, whether it's just in Sheffield, whether it's the south of the country, whether it's the different nations around us. And I think we've done a lot in terms of helping people to understand what the problems are. It would be great in the future, maybe we could get back together and just talk about, okay, what can we do from here?
Solutions.
Invite people on. What little things can we do just to give little pockets of people hope that then expand outwards? Because I feel that the future is going to demand that from us, because people at the top are never going to be able to provide it.
Well, let's do another episode where we are forbidden from being negative.
That's a brilliant idea. Thank you so much, Martyn, for coming on. I truly appreciate it. If you can just hang on a sec after we finish recording as well. But it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.